Welcome to the show, everybody. Micah with Coronavirus Diaries, and today I'm fortunate enough to again speak with Carry Metkowski, an online leadership and team coach. Carry, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. For the viewers and listeners that maybe aren't familiar with the other sessions that we've done or unfamiliar with you, can you give them a brief overview of who are you, what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I teach leaders online. I help them with who they're becoming, where they want to go. I help them with influence, communication, all that kind of fun jazz.
Yeah. So before we started our session today, like we always do, we just kind of catch up and see how each other's been and kind of talk about the headlines. And today we were discussing a bit about the changing times. Obviously, we've been in lockdowns in our state for just over a month now, or right around the month. And now there's big debates on opening up or staying locked down or how to move forward. And you had made a really interesting comment, and I'd love to go down this track. So if you wouldn't mind, in terms of generational experience,
Yeah.
share what you had shared when we started.
Yeah, I was just observing the differences in sort of the generations about responses to this. And I was sharing with you that when I was a kid, if like the chicken pox would break out, all the parents would send their children over to that kid's house so that they could get infected.
Yeah.
Herd immunity was just something that they were taught and they were raised in, and so there wasn't this huge fear about it. There was this, let's get it over with so that you can get back to life and you're immune to it, and that's just kind of how things rolled.
Yeah.
And but I was noticing that for my generation specifically, we'd go several decades before there was something large, seismic, globally that would shift or impact all of our culture. Like the Vietnam War, the Berlin Wall coming down, stuff like that. But I've noticed, like my oldest is 30. And just sort of their experience has been 9/11, the big economic crash, then these diseases like this. And I've noticed there's just a significant belief system or confidence in safety for like my generation and older. They feel fairly confident coming into COVID about, and having questions like, well, isn't this just like the flu? And, many people die from the flu, and we kind of imagine that that's what will happen here. And whereas the younger generation, their sense of security around this and their confidence about being safe and secure, I think because of the experiences that they've had are just different. They have a different experience background that leads them into how they process this sort of situation.
Yeah, I'd recently done an interview with a friend, colleague, Dr. Scarborough, is a practicing clinical psychologist, and we were talking about confirmation biases. And one of the things that he had suggested is, to try to eliminate the potential for these confirmation biases is to seek out the opposition, the opposing views, and it's
Steel man and straw man, the arguments.
Yeah. And yeah, one of the other things that we had chatted about a little bit before this was just the nature of information that we are taking in, and kind of how algorithms and the models are working in different platforms, whether it be social media or other, where we are actively being fed specific content that is likely that we will appreciate it, or as opposed to just, here's the information, you deduce what is relevant. So it's almost like there is a bias towards us, the information we're receiving, that would confirm all of our own beliefs as opposed to generate dialogue here and there. Is that
I think some of that's true. And then also I've noticed in the platforms, you have the ability to design your feed. So if there's particular content or content providers that don't agree with your worldview, you can have them removed. And so you really do design to your confirmation bias. I don't particularly want to hear the other person's approach on this, or this. And so you can shut it out, right? So you can literally design to hear just the people you want to hear. And I think the danger in that is not being able to mentally formulate and articulate not an argument necessarily, but the strengths of the other person's point of view, but also the strengths of yours, so that you
Right.
could continue a dialogue instead of, more of this headbutting. It leaves us opposed and oppositional rather than working together, creating that shift so that we can move together better. And I think, like you said, you had mentioned, you have to go out and really verify your own sources, find out your own information, and then decide where you stand. And I just don't think I don't hear, I shouldn't say I don't think there's a lot of people out there doing that. I should say I wonder if enough of us are
Sure.
out there doing it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Is how, if you could actually find out the percentages of people that are just happy to get the information that's handed to them, and
Yeah.
focus on that as fact. Maybe pivoting a bit from this, but in the same realm of things, we were talking about businesses pivoting, and this is something that you've been working with business leaders and teams for the better part of 2 decades.
Yeah.
You had shared that you're identifying and you're noticing a certain type of mentality amongst business leaders and teams. Would you mind just digging into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I opened up when the coronavirus hit. I was thinking, gosh, who do I want to be in this moment? When history comes down, I thought, man, I really want to help companies bad. And right now, I put out all my coaching for free. I was just like, let's just get through this together. Let's find our way through. And so I started working with a lot of different people, and it was sort of everybody's trying to figure out how to pivot. And I noticed that 2 very distinct things happen when situations like this arise. Either fear shuts you down, or fear wakes you up. And it's the response to it is so, it's not only is it visceral, but the mindset that gets exposed to both of those patterns. It's really, I find it very interesting. And you can work with either one, but usually what you do need to help them pivot their own mindset. If we're dealing with it's shutting me down,
Sure.
it's shutting our company down, help them pivot into a mindset of how can we, come alive even more.
Right. Yeah, I've been watching an older history series called "The Men Who Built America," and I shared briefly how watching it again. I don't know how. Like, I ended up seeing it in one of my streams, and I just gravitated towards it because I enjoy history and business types of stuff. And I just find it to be super relevant to what's happening now. In that there are, like, some of the folks that I talk to, it's almost like it really is. COVID is actually helping them in some ways, whether it's the pivot or whether it's just finally doing the thing that they've always wanted to, or it's shaking things up enough to where they're kind of taking a step back and look at this big picture view. But a lot of the things I'd seen with the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, and the Edisons and the Fords, they all had significant opposition. They all had this high level of competition, but they always tended in some capacity to identify the problem, formulate some sort of a plan, and execute. And sometimes it worked, sometimes maybe not so much, sometimes maybe better than they had anticipated. But it was just, you get to see kind of this natural progression of these business leaders, they're just like the biggest types of leaders, business developers in history. There was something they were talking about, the net wealth was more than like the accumulated wealth in the US or something. It was just crazy when they were doing the difference between the amount of money they had at the time compared to now, it was like $1 trillion was the combination of a couple of these individuals' net worth, which is more than Bill Gates and all these folks now, and Jeff Bezos. So, but to the point, it's interesting where there is different types of people, and there's the ones that would, they would see opposition and, something fighting them as something would shut them down. And then there's the others that would rise to the occasion and combat that. I'm curious, when you're working with these people, maybe share a little bit about kind of how you would approach working with a leader that is seeming to almost shut down, or they're looking at it and they're identifying, maybe it's the half glass empty mentality. how do you approach that? How do you
Well, I usually share this story, and I kind of queued it up just because I've been using it so much in the last 4 weeks. So I told them the story of Bob, and he had a company back during World War II, and it was a very popular fuzzy beverage company, and they were facing foreclosure for a couple of reasons. Sugar had skyrocketed. The cost of sugar skyrocketed during World War II, and so it was rationed. But Bob knew the only way his company was going to make it is if he went on the offensive and pushed production into more markets than he could ever imagine. And the problem was that he had maxed out 6 loans. And by all accounts, looking back at the history of Bob's life, he wasn't really a good sure bet. He'd failed several times. He flunked out of high school.
So this is based on a true story.
Yeah, this is a true story.
Okay.
Yeah, he flunked out of high school. He flunked out of military school. He flunked out of college. Let's just say Bob was not really specifically Bob smart or book smart, but what he did have going for him was that he would pay people to do his homework. And his theory was, if you can pay the best person to do the work, that's the smartest approach. Well, in school, that gets us into trouble, but Bob was thinking, well, that's how you do things. Bob could get people to do the thing that was needed to get done. And so while he may not have been an academic leader, he was certainly a large social influence even in school while he was failing. After working his way up the ladder, he became the CEO of this soft drink company, a company that ended up reshaping America's image of Santa Claus himself. In World War II, when this was all being threatened, he decided he wanted his business to rise to the occasion. And rather than allow the price of sugar to shut down his business, he decided he was going to ship the product worldwide, and he made a promise. Every single soldier on the front line would be able to buy this product for 5 cents. No matter how much it cost his company to make it, he was going to ensure that they would have a taste of home wherever they had to go fight on the fronts.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a huge promise, and it cost him dearly, but he was already deeply in debt. But oddly enough, as he began shipping overseas, one of the large commanders of the Army at the time, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who happened to love the drink and noticed how much the guys, what it really meant to them, he approached him. He was in North Africa.
Morale booster.
And he said, well, if I got the military to build you a manufacturing plant here and got you sugar, would you do that? And he was like, absolutely, let's make it happen. So the Army ended up building not 1, not 2, not 3, but 64 plants internationally for this company and providing them sugar for free because of the morale that it offered the men.
Wow.
So he went on to fulfill these orders, and that's the difference of what sets people who panic in these times and people who thrive in these times, is they decide to make this huge push forward. Today, this soft drink is officially known as the soft drink of summer. And by now you've probably guessed that it's Coca-Cola. And because of this courageous decision, he was unwilling to let the company go down and experience a loss. And he knew that the only way to do it in a market where this was not a necessary item, it's something people could do without, he had to figure out how to make a difference. But now it didn't stop there for him. So he was distributing it 1 bottle at a time. So from this innovation, this push into all these markets, he had to create soda fountains. From there, he went on to create vending machines. From there, he went on to create the 6-pack.
Built the industry around soft drinks.
Yeah. All of this came out of him being unwilling to let his company die. And so I just think I think it's a great example of what's possible in today's markets. You have to make a decision, who am I going to be in this moment, and what's the greatest need I can serve? No matter what it costs me, let's go see what we can make happen. And I think that's that difference that's a very good example of fear waking somebody up.
Yeah.
And so when I share that with these guys, when we're having these conversations about they immediately go to shutdowns, layoffs, all this stuff.
Cutting overhead, cutting costs.
Yeah, shut it all down. Instead of figuring out how can we serve people even more so that when we pull out of this, we're who they want to do business with?
Yeah. There's one of the stories in that that history series was on Henry Ford, and it's very, very similar in nature to what you're suggesting. Is there was this group. It was essentially a monopoly on the car industry, that they had to license people to sell cars based on a perceived patent on an automobile, like just a patent on an automobile. And Henry Ford basically had to fight against them, ramped up production, pushed it out. And in the midst of everything, he was literally gambling with his his business, saying, if I'm wrong with this, I'm losing everything. But if I'm right, I will change society. And he changed, the Model T changed society. It became available for everybody. It was why they said like $800 for a car back then.
Yeah,
which is
a lot of money back then.
But it was accessible to the masses as opposed to just being this elite means of transportation. Going from horse and carriage to this car. I just love, and with your Coke example, it's an amazing thing how if having faith. It sounds like having faith is probably a pretty significant factor.
Well, and these guys had an experience of themselves that in the face of their failures, they still trusted themselves to lean in again. Yeah. And so a lot of times as a coach, I'm helping people process their own experience of themselves. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes when we let ourselves down, when we didn't do what we thought we were going to do, when we don't accomplish what we thought we could, it dings our confidence. And as a leader, if you've got a cap on your confidence, everybody else around you's got a cap on their confidence.
Once bit, twice shy kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And confidence, it's kind of king on some of this stuff, right? It's one of those big indicators of high self-trust, high IQ, all that kind of good juicy stuff where growth and development live.
Sure.
And if you don't have a good relationship with yourself and the stories that you're telling yourself about your past, so that you've got access to confidence when you need it, you're in trouble, right?
Sure.
You are going to contract and cocoon in these times instead of flourish and colorize the rest of the world.
Do you have any examples of leadership or teams that you've worked with where maybe when you had first approached them, they were lacking a resemblance of confidence, and then how do you develop that? How do you pull them out of this mindset?
So a lot of times they tend to be creative leaders. So they've created a product that hit the market really big. Products have, that bell curve, early adoption, mass, it hits the masses and then it trails off. And that's very true in online learning products, right? Well, this guy had created at the time, it was the #1 learning product in the world.
Wow.
Six Sigma did finally eclipse it. But what his fear was, is I made it big once. I don't think I can do it again. And so being able to overcome all of that, even though in the face of a success, he didn't think it was repeatable. And so how do you get that confidence level, self-trust, team trust to push forward into what's her name? Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote that Eat, Pray, Love. Well, nobody knows that she wrote 4 other books before that were not a success. And then her biggest fear was after this worldwide phenomena, what do I write now? And is it ever going to measure up? And it's like, she says, it's probably not going to ever measure up. That's not the point. The point is that you continue to use this gift and the world decides what's going to happen with it, not you. And so to take that pressure off, and it's like, I'm not going to recreate the next Six Sigma again. I'm going to create something that's useful and meaningful to people.
That's a conversation I've had with a lot of creatives over the years, is that whether they're creating content for, whatever platform they're on, or it's in the real world, physical creation stuff, that this idea of, I did this thing and I didn't think twice about it. It just happened. And the next thing you know, it was like this huge, it was really significant. Whereas there was other stuff that they were pouring a lot more time, energy, resources into, excuse me. And they never really lifted off. They never really did what they thought they would. So it was this weird juggling act of like, I never intended for that to be anything more than just this quick thing I did. And now I'm having to divert my attention from this passion project to this other thing. But, you know, that's the decision that you make, right? Is to roll with the punches and make stuff happen, I guess.
Well, and I think the thing that I constantly remind, especially creatives, getting back into, and to be honest, creatives could be anywhere from a photographer to, you know, somebody who's writing code for a brand new SaaS product, right? Like creation or creators live across a wide variety of industries. And it is just keep the heart that you're here to serve. How do I serve the world next? How do I serve the world here and now? And then trust that the product will hit when it's supposed to and how it's supposed to. And that, again, that coming back to that confidence piece, my experience of myself over time, right? And then how am I processing when I have an experience that I think I've let myself down or let somebody else down, so that I can have confidence on the backside of that to step back in and swing again.
Do you find that's great advice, but do you find when you go into teams, is there ever a need to, I don't know the politically correct way to say it, but to cut dead weight or to shave off, like if there's like maybe toxic people or pessimistic?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So it's to get rid of them and then suddenly the morale and the...
I wouldn't say suddenly, no. It's because toxic people are allowed to survive because of the conditions. And that usually means that there's a political system at play that has favored them. And that's a very, in creative fields, that tends to be very true. Creatives want people around them that make them feel good. And so that person will shine to that leader and be really crappy to everybody else. But the leader wants and needs the shine, so they're willing to put up with a whole lot of other stuff. And so you kind of have to draw the attention to political power being spent. And when somebody's shining to you, so that you can really get rid of that, so that you get everybody's best gifts and talents on the table in order to serve the customer, not serve you, the leader. And so it's just shifting where the service is being focused.
Outstanding. Yeah, that's great insight. You can tell you've been doing this for a little while, huh?
Maybe once or twice.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy woman. Was there anything that that you were hoping we touch on that we haven't?
No, just I wish everybody well while they're pivoting through all this, because I know it's significant. And I hope that people in their teams figure out how to, even if they are feeling more contracted, like fear is trying to shut them down, get curious about what could you be opening up to, process the change well.
Sure. That's great. Great information. For any viewers, listeners that are interested, all of Carrie's information will be in the section, the about section below. Be sure to reach out if you have any questions or you're looking for a team coach or a leadership coach. Until next time, stay tuned. We got more coming at you. Thanks again, Carrie.
You're welcome. Have a great day.